Hello, KCIW listeners, and welcome to Curry Cafe, where we put together a panel of volunteers and guests who discuss various topics from whimsical and fun to more serious subjects.
Well, hello, and once again, welcome to another edition of the Curry Cafe. My name is Ray Gary, and I'm more or less going to be hosting the show today. And it's, as Rick just said, we have whimsical and serious subjects, and I think it's going to be kind of a serious one today. We have two very honored guests who will introduce themselves in just a minute, and I will start off the program after they introduce themselves with my segment called Lie of the Week. So why don't we start with you, and we'll go around and introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and why you think you should be here.
Hi, Rick. I'm Father Bernie. Thank you for having me. Well, Rick is the host, but you're Ray. And thank you for having me here with you today on the cafe.
Do you think you need any introduction?
Father Bernie?
I mean, other than that, will that just come out during the show?
Well, I'm the priest of St. Timothy's Episcopal Church. And I think quite a few of our listeners here on KCIW would know who I am.
Okay.
And that you weren't born here, but were raised here.
Well, I was born in Crescent City, yeah.
Close, but no cigar.
Close enough, yeah.
I'm Robert O'Sullivan. I have had a rather unusual life in that the first kind of half of my adult life, I was largely in media and politics in California. And then in my late 40s, early 50s, I decided to become a high school teacher, which I became both in English and social studies, teaching things like U.S. history and civics, as well as a part-time Lutheran pastor. And I did both of those roles for a good 20-plus years. And like Father Bernie, I wound up being the pastor of the church I was as a teenager. It's unusual for that to happen, but we share a fair number of things in common. That
People who are housed, but it's precariously housed. They're one paycheck away from losing their housing. There's very many people who are having their they're having their homes taken away from them from inability to pay, and they can't have another place to live. It's not like we have a lot of options when it comes to housing in our area. I was talking to a guy who's a construction, he's like a contractor, and I'm very glad. We need more contractors. We need more building. We need more homes. The thing that I worry about, though, is that the homes that we're going to build here in this community are going to be $750,000 homes and up, instead of the kind of homes that we need in order for the workforce people to be able to live in. The people in the work,
one might become vacation homes as well.
Yeah. That's a concern, isn't it?
It's contractors are business people, and you go where the money is when you're a business person.
Well, we have to figure out how to incentivize low-income housing. And, calling it low-income housing makes it sound like, it's less than, that's subpar housing. And what we need is workforce housing. Originally, when Brookings became a community, it was a mill town, and there were homes for the mill workers. And a lot of these homes that are down on, say, Hemlock Street and Spruce Street and up on Pacific Avenue, all the different ones that are kind of in the heart of downtown Brookings, those homes were made specifically for mill workers to live in. They were small, they were modest, but they were sturdy and are still there now, and affordable. And we need more of that kind of housing in our community. The kind of we don't need 2,500 square feet homes. We need 1,200 square foot homes. Yeah. And to incentivize the contractors for the developers for building those homes, we're going to have to come up with better strategies.
I have some friends that want to move here, and they have a substantial income, and their budget is $500,000, and they have not been able to find anything.
I've heard similar stories.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of goes to show, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
$500,000, and you can't find anything to buy because the market starts at $600,000 or $700,000. Mm-hmm. So we have to figure something. Maybe apartment complexes. We have to come up with better alternatives to the housing in our community.
So it's kind of my understanding that one of the reasons that we have trouble building, for instance, a subdivision with this kind of housing is that everything involved in before you put a shovel in the ground is full of red tape and is incredibly expensive, getting permits and things of that nature.
I've had friends tell me that I know a guy that he owns a piece of land and he would like to put on like a fourplex, and he said that it was going to be cost prohibitive because of the whatever sewer hookups or whatever. So the most affordable place to live in our area would be the manufactured homes, the parks, I call them trailer parks. I don't know if maybe there's a better name for them.
Manufactured home parks, I think they prefer.
Yeah, I suppose. But
those are going up as well.
Well, unfortunately, there is one particular park that I'm aware of where the space rent is $700 a month. And this park is not like the deluxe park. It has numerous different problems. And it's where our working class people are living is in this particular park, but parks like it. And $700 a month space rent. The reason why people originally wanted to live there is because the space rent was like $400 a month. Mm-hmm. Well, now it's gone from $400 a month to $700 a month. And why is that? It's because these different out-of-town investors, they bought it, they formed an LLC, and they're extracting money back to Sacramento or wherever it is they live. Maybe it's Portland, wherever it is that they live. And now our people can't afford to live there anymore. And when I say our people, I mean the residents of Brookings that are providing the ones that are stocking the shelves in the grocery stores, the ones who are working in the banks, the ones who are making sure that people are having their lawns mowed and taking care of our community on minimum wage type jobs. And we have to make sure that they can afford to live here too.
I have a suggestion about where this should go next, and it's giving a little history of St. Tim's as always being involved in being sensitive to real live human needs, which a lot of churches don't pay much attention to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I forgot to do this, which I frequently do. We have a way you can get in touch with our guests here by sending us a text. And the phone number is 541-661-4098. It's 541-661-4098. And you can call up and compliment our guests or call them naughty names or do whatever you like. And we have operators standing by. So let's not waste our operators standing by money. Give us a text. Have an opinion.
Yep, our operator's name is Linda. Mm-hmm. So the housing is a big issue for our community at large, but also access to health care is a really big thing. We need to make sure that we need more primary care providers. We need more dentists that see low-income people. As you well know, Ray, once somebody's on Medicare, that doesn't mean that they're going to have dental coverage. Mm. So we need to come up with better ways to be able to provide for the care of people of all ages when it comes to access to mental health, when it comes to primary care, when it comes to access to dental care, when it comes to physical therapy, all the different things that we might be able to find in other communities, and in fact have to travel to go get those services to other communities.
I see a eye professional twice a year, and I have glaucoma and a few other little things that they take care of. But it's pretty much my guess that people who don't have coverage or don't have any kind of disposable income see an eye doctor twice a year.
Highly unlikely.
I know I don't. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to dental care, fortunately there's a new dentist that's going to see Medicaid patients here in town. His practice is it's in a soft opening right now. Eventually, it's going to roll out more, and potentially it will have 2,400 patients because of the lack of people who can get dental care that are Medicaid people.
That sounds great. Whenever I go to my doctor for a checkup, or whenever I have something that I know they can't fix here or deal with here, I have to get in the car and go to Medford. And I loathe getting in the car and going to Medford, other than my trip to Costco. But that's really a problem. If you need any kind of a specialist, pretty much, you're going to have to pack up and go.
And our working class folks, they're not going to be able to go to Medford. They're not Costco shoppers, first of all.
Right.
And so that benefit that like you're talking about, I was going to Costco. I mean, that's fine
good
for
news,
a lot of
bad
us.
News is what
but for the working class people, they don't have Costco memberships. Mm-hmm. And to actually go to Medford and come back, they'd have to miss a day of work. They would have the cost of the gas, the wear and tear on the car, which may or may not be reliable enough to get there. So to roll out better care here, I'll kind of give an example of how desperately this like dental care is needed here in our community. We over the last probably 12 years, we've had a dental van from Medical Teams International has come to the church on different occasions and parked at the church to offer free dental care to anyone who meets the income criteria, which is not that hard for people to do.
They're here in town today.
Oh,
Yep.
are they?
Yep. They just closed up. They just finished just a few minutes ago. That's what I was on. When I was coming here, I was getting an update on how many people that we saw. And it was 18. It was 16. We had 16 people that were seen by the dentist on that mobile dental van. So to have it come on a Sunday isn't, ideal for us, but we take what it comes our. When they say, hey, we got a free day, we can come on that Sunday, I tell them yes, and we'll figure it out. Because
How'd the community find out about that? This is the first I've heard of it, but it's not something I've been paying attention to.
Yeah, so like I say, we've been having these periodically for the last 12 years, maybe, and it might even be more. I lose track of the time. It was probably around 2012, I suppose, when we had our first dental van visit. And sometimes it'll only come twice a year. Sometimes it'll come 6 times a year. It just depends on the funding because it's all grant funded.
Right.
And so we have to request grant money, and it comes from various different sources. And then they have to have the availability. But we knew about 2 weeks ago that it was coming. And so it was advertised out on some different Facebook pages mostly.
Oh, okay.
But there were also other outlets that were, I don't even remember. We have a team of people at St. Timothy's that make sure that our ministries run smoothly. And, that's promotion of that was not my
We have what we call a soapbox feature here. I think that's what it's called, where somebody can come in and do a 2-minute recording about just about anything. And that would be an ideal place to advertise that, I think.
Yeah, it would, because part of what happens is once we get the word out, then word of mouth kind of takes over too. But we had, like I say, 16 people, and I got to meet, interact with some of them this morning, and it was pretty cool because they were doing some other screenings. They had a nurse that came with them, and they were doing some A1C screenings. And they could do it in real time. They had the device set up on the counter that they feed the blood sample through, so that they can, while you're there, during your dental visit, you can find out what your A1C is, so that your blood sugar level.
So are they doing fillings and on the spot? Or?
Yeah, and extractions is going to be the thing that they're going to get the most value for their time on an extraction, because it's going to take the pain away and it's going to solve the problem. It's not certainly we would wish that people could get root canals and it could be solved that way.
Right. Obviously,
I happen to know. Well, I happen to know from firsthand knowledge from last Tuesday that a root canal is $2,200 in Grants Pass.
And not a lot of fun.
Not a lot of fun.
And I have good dental coverage, and I think it would cover half of that.
Yeah.
But it's more fun now than it used to be. It used to be hell on earth, but I guess they perfected it now, so it's not as bad. Which doesn't mean anything as not as bad.
I think something that's important to realize historically is what a role St. Tim's has played in this community. I moved here with my wife in 2015, 2016, and it soon became pretty clear that St. Tim's was a place to go for a lot of services. And as COVID came on and the city just about shut down in many, many ways, St. Tim's was probably the first place around where you could get COVID shots. That's where I got mine. And also, while other social services were shutting down, the county health department was shut down, St. Tim's was the place to go to get help. And they did a remarkable job. And curiously, what has become another major force in the community, Brookings Core, basically got its start at St. Tim's. And it's always been a place, the food bank was started there. It's always been a place where people know that if they can't get help at other places, St. Tim's was a place to go. which has made it controversial in its neighborhood.
Yeah, it's a little
And
bit. Yeah.
but part of its controversy is due to a geographical fact that it's next to a large public park, Azalea Park. And people in the neighborhood who have complaints about somebody going through their trash blame it on somebody going to St. Tim's for lunch or something like that, while really it might be someone who was camping out in Azalea Park the night before and trying to find a few soda bottles to get a little spare change. And but this congregation has faced extreme discrimination and a lot of just unfactual stuff. And it's too bad, but basically the taxpayers have been forced to pay probably over $1 million if you count all the tax dollars that go into the federal government in the lawsuit, where the federal government took the side of St. Tim's. And when you look at other ways in which court employees, judges were all involved, over $625,000 went to lawyers who were involved in the lawsuit. And this could all have been avoided if the city council, who got a complaint from 29 or 30 complaints about vagrants and undesirables hanging out in their neighborhood, if the city council at the time tried to work with the church to try and stop a lot of these alleged complaints from happening. But rather than that, the city council decided to start getting tough on the church. And unfortunately, they apparently didn't even have a high school civics understanding of constitutional law in this country. That there, in many ways, the history of liberty in this country is involving telling governments that they should stay out of certain things. They should stay out of interfering with the freedom of speech, with the freedom of the press, with the freedom of religion and the practice thereof. And they have to treat those things differently. They just can't assume, well, it's in our city and it's a land use issue, and we can ignore that all the other stuff because we live on the banana belt and we're a banana republic all on our own, and it doesn't apply to us. And all of that litigation could have not happened if they simply had that understanding that you have to treat churches differently. That understanding is not only in the federal Constitution, it's even more clearly stated in the Oregon Constitution, which says no law in any form whatever should interfere with people's religious exercise. And for Christians, especially if they take seriously the parable of the Last Judgment in Matthew, the latter part of the Matthew 25, recognize that to be truly faithful to their Lord, it means being sensitive and responding creatively and lovingly to those who are the least among us, in the words of that. Inasmuch as in the parable, we're reminded that if people are sick, or they're naked, or they're hungry, or they're a stranger, a foreigner, that they should be treated with love and respect. And in the words of a famous Roman Catholic theologian who just died, who was the founder of liberation theology, that Christianity should have a peculiar bias on behalf of the poor. And St. Timothy's has shown that with, I like to say, in spades and diamonds and clubs, and especially in hearts.
That's good.
I think
that.
When you talk about that peculiar bias, I think our city council had just exactly that.
They have the bias against the poor.
Against, yes.
And that's at the heart of the issue. And we're glad that St. Tim's was willing to stand up and say, no, you can't do that. And they're part of a worldwide communion of churches. And because they're related to churches all over Oregon and all over the United States and all over the world, they could have the resources to fund a lawsuit that made it clear that the city should not do what it was trying to do.
When I first moved to Brookings, I was going to a a city council meeting. I happened to mention to a friend, I hadn't been here very long enough. There was something that interested me. And my friend said, well, you're just wasting your time. Don't go to that because they've already made up their mind, and whatever you say is not going to change their mind. And I was shocked to find out that that was exactly true. And they've made some decisions, and I won't talk about it because I'm sick of talking about it, that actually endangered the community by removing the possibility of this station being an emergency broadcast network or station.
So, Ray, I wanted to kind of piggyback on some of the stuff that Pastor Robert was saying, because the petition, this whole thing started because of a petition, with the 29 signatures. And specifically, it wasn't super clear. It said we want to have the vagrants removed from the church or something along those lines. But what they were referring to, I have no doubt, was our car camping thing that we had going on, because in the middle of the pandemic, the city council had a hope that all the 15 churches that are in the city limits, that each one of the churches would have 3 cars in their respective parking lots with people in it, and that would take and have so that the unhoused folks would have places to be, so they wouldn't just be roaming around, because at the time we didn't know what to expect out of this pandemic. And in fact, Brookings was a little bit later with the deadly part of it than the rest of the country was, because during the Delta wave, August of 2021, we certainly did see a large number of people dying from COVID-19. But we had already, by then though, we had already had some fatigue, some COVID fatigue, people like the social distancing was becoming old by then. And so we let our guard down, and then then we had, that Delta wave was very devastating for us. But what happened though was that we'd already had at that point, 6 or 8 months worth of people living in our parking lot, and none of the other churches did have that parking
going on.
Yeah, and they had asked all of the 15 churches to do that. So it wasn't our idea. We didn't ask them if we could have the 3 cars in our parking lot. They asked us if we would be willing to house the 3 cars in our parking lot. It made sense to us. We did it. There were requirements that were involved that had to do with sanitation. We made sure that was all being met. And the people were, they were kind of doing fine, but after a year, they started to devolve. They started to have some issues that were happening within themselves. Okay. Now, so let me finish this thought just quickly, because this is kind of the important part, is that when the petition went around, I firmly believe it was to end the car camping. And at that point, it made sense that we should end the car camping, because the Delta wave was over with.
Other churches weren't doing it.
Other churches weren't doing it. We needed to move past that. And so we did stop the car camping, which made me think that we had satisfied what the petition was initially requesting. But then the city council decided, no, we need to stop. We need to slow down the number of days a week that you feed people. Well, the two things, I didn't see that they were related, but yet this is where we were. Anyway, I'm sorry, Linda.
That's okay.
We have a text coming in.
There is a text. Yes, and I'll read it to you. Yeah.
Operator that has been standing by now has a function.
Okay, there we go. The text says, manufactured home parks are having trouble throughout the country, with large companies buying out the parks, then forcing out the current residents by raising space rents. Those residents are usually seniors on low fixed incomes or families trying to survive on low wages. Was there any dialogue at all between the city council, the petitioners, and St. Tim's to prevent a lawsuit?
Oh, well, those two ideas didn't quite, it took a change there. But I fully recognize, that thing happening with the manufactured home parks. But then when you switch to the dialogue to try to prevent the lawsuit, absolutely. Because one of the things that we did was we said, okay, we realize there's a problem with the car camping. We will stop it. And we did. And the people and the cars, they went on to wherever else they went on to, but they weren't on the church grounds anymore. And then we set up a rule that said that no one can be on the church grounds after 6 o'clock at night. It's a agreement that we have with the city police. So the city police, if they're driving by and they see somebody after 6 o'clock on the church grounds, and I hate to use the word loitering, but if they see somebody loitering, they can trespass that person, and they'll no longer be allowed back to the church. And we've had to do that on a few different occasions. But that's because we want to make sure that we minimize. And I know that there's probably at least one of our neighbors that lives in close proximity to the church that would laugh at what I have to say. But we really do care about our impact on the community, on the homes that surround us. We very much care about that. In fact, this morning when the dental van got there, it was like 6:50 or 6:55. It wasn't even 7 o'clock yet. It was still dark out. And, it's got a diesel engine and it's kind of loud. And I'm thinking to myself, man, what? We need to get this guy plugged in so he can get everything turned off, because we don't need, this big Winnebago thing making a bunch of noise in our neighborhood when it's still early and it's still dark. And, that's a rare occasion. That's not something that happens regularly, but we're very much concerned. And so we did go to the city and we said, what can we do in order to make this okay? And they said, well, I don't even know what they said. They said, well, we're gonna make this ordinance. Do you want to feed 2 days a week or 3 days a week? And I said, well, we currently feed 4 days a week. So what are you talking about? So their idea, we wanted to sit down, we wanted to have a conversation, we wanted to get around a table, and we wanted to talk about what we can do in order to mitigate the the impact of our ministries on the homes that are surrounding us. And instead of having a conversation, what the city council told us was, we're putting in an ordinance, and do you want 2 days or do you want 3 days?
And of course, the ordinance, as the federal judge eventually said, was patently unconstitutional because they don't have the right to tell churches how to perform their religious duties in their facility. And what got really worse by the council was they not only tried to limit the time and the number of feedings, they came up with this cockamamie scheme saying that there are too many social services going on in the church and that it was their right to say that they can't be there anymore. They didn't define social service, they didn't pay attention to the constitutional law, and they didn't pay attention to a federal law which was passed in the year 2000 by both houses of Congress unanimously. It's called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, and it had a remarkable history. It passed Congress unanimously by voice vote. No one objected. The sponsors of it, the major sponsors of it in the U.S. Senate, there were two. One of the most conservative members, Orrin Hatch of Utah, and one of the most liberal members, Teddy Kennedy of Massachusetts, and it passed unanimously. And it says that a city or any other government agency has to have a compelling state interest that cannot be resolved by other means. And that means something real serious. It's not just another land use issue, which the mayor claimed that it was even after the judge ruled and all that, because the federal legislation says you can't mess with churches unless you have this compelling state interest, and they clearly didn't.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, you're saying that they had to come up with the least restrictive means.
Yes, the least restrictive means of reaching that interest.
And we wanted to enter into a dialogue around that, and then they said, no, we're going to do this ordinance. And when they said we're going to do an ordinance, I said, we can't sign up for an ordinance that we will immediately be in violation of. We can't sign up for a permit, because that's what the ordinance was, a permit to feed 2 days a week. I can't get a permit when we're going to be feeding 4 days a week. I can't get your permit from you. And then immediately, because I know I'm going to be violating it. So we had to retain legal counsel. Once we did that, we couldn't have a conversation anymore. We couldn't talk to the city anymore, because now we are, because lawsuits are adversarial by nature. And once we've entered into this adversarial relationship, we can't how are we going to find a compromise at that point?
Doesn't the city council have lawyers?
Well, absolutely.
Pretty simple advice, Ron?
Well, Well, what are you going to do there? I mean,
I mean, you're saying that this is a given that the government cannot mess with the church feeding people.
that's what the judge said.
That's
what
what
the
the
federal
federal government said as well.
Doesn't the council have an attorney that they say this is what we want to do, and that attorney says
So not only did not only did the judge say that, but before the judge even said that, the United States Department of Justice said that, and they said, "No, we don't think so. You can't fight City Hall. We're City Hall. You can't fight. We set the rules here." And I think that I don't understand why. I have to believe that their legal team, because there's more than one lawyer involved in all that, told them this isn't going to go well for you guys. But by the same token, those lawyers are still collecting a paycheck. Mm-hmm. So what do you do there?
Job security.
Well, I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I don't want to get overly cynical, but somebody...
I do. I do it all the time.
Well, I can't... For me to get too cynical it's going to interfere with my ability to do my job. But as a pastor...
It makes me a job.
Yeah.
The form...
It's job security for me to be cynical.
For whatever reason, I had a friend many, many years ago. He was a mentor for me. And he said, you don't hire a lawyer and then disregard their advice. And sadly, I feel like the legal advice that was given to our city council was ignored.
So, no, was this the old city council or the so-called new city council?
Apparently it was all of the above. But, those that happened in closed sessions. I don't know all the details around it. I don't know what they were told, of course. But what I do know is that we prevailed, and here we are.
In their argument for what was the escalation they did in this through an abatement procedure, an abatement procedure is something that city and county governments often use if there's a problem on the property with something like vermin or too many vehicles or too many boats or whatever, and making the place
public health
an eyesore. And public health is the main thing about it, although sometimes aesthetics plays into it as well. And they tried to fine the church $720 a day until it removed certain social services from the property.
Apparently they never even looked at the first couple of items in the Constitution.
They especially did not pay attention to the religious land use ordinance, because that says you can't do it. And their justification for doing it was somebody in the planning department was told to write a summary of why this should be done. And so they apparently Googled the word church and found two definitions saying that the church is a building for Christian worship.
Oh.
And they found one from a very prestigious dictionary, Oxford English Dictionary, and another, the Webster's Merriam-Webster in the U.S. But the problem is they looked at one definition, and that's all they did.
It should be obvious it's not just Christian.
It's not just Christian, but it's also
more than just worship.
It's communities of people. It's communities of people committed to good deeds. And anyway, they're saying, based on a totally illogical and slightly bizarre idea, that churches could not be helping people to get health care. They could not be feeding people. That all of that's not worship. And if it's not worship, it doesn't belong in a building built for worship. That made no sense.
I'm not a particularly religious person, to say the least, but isn't that a lot of the stuff that Jesus did?
You betcha, Red Rider.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Let me get this phone number in again in case you want to jump in. You can text us at 541-661-4098. 541-661-4098. Operators are standing by.
So one of the things that I wanted to comment, Ray, is that, so that the lawsuit's over, the money's been settled out, they paid their attorneys all the way through, that amounted to $225,000. Then they were responsible for a portion of how much our legal fees were. That we didn't get compensated fully, but our law firm agreed to an amount that was $400,000. Law firms, it's plural. There's more than one law firm. And so the whole cost to the taxpayer of the city of Brookings is $625,000. That's how that amount got and that didn't go to us. I mean, the church didn't see any of that money. That went to our legal our legal team. But what the thing is what we want to do now is focus on moving forward. And when I talk about this housing problem that we have, what we want to do, what we want to strive toward, is like a tiny village, like what's going on in Medford, and they have it go in Eugene, certainly to a certain extent. They have it in Eureka, and what's going on in Grants Pass. Mm-hmm. They have kind of a tent city thing going on that isn't what I want. What I would like to see are little structures, and a piece of land with a fence around it where they have restroom and hygiene and all the different things that they need, in order to survive and be to get their basic needs met.
Isn't there something like that in Medford?
Yeah, it's called I forget what they're all called. Hope Village, Opportunity Village. There's different ones throughout the state and throughout the region, and so there would be tiny structures of some kind. Mm-hmm. That might be pallet. What do they call them? Pallet homes or pallet shelters. There's the Conestoga types. There's things that look like storage sheds. The Medford one with Rogue Retreat. They're like little duplexes where the structures have, there's a common wall and but regardless of what that looks like, a piece of land to be able to place this, that is the sticking point. We can build the structures. That's not the problem. We can always figure out the structures. What we can't figure out is the land that we need in order to put this tiny home village. And, we might only get 30 people in there, but because there's probably 200 people that are unhoused at any given time in the city, in our area. And so say we only get 30 in there, but then there's also, a newly opened shelter. There's a home where there's already 10 people. There's going to be a winter shelter program, that we've had in the past, and that'll get another 20 people off the ground into.
Is this what CORE is doing?
Yeah.
Could you briefly explain exactly what CORE is?
Well, Brookings Core Response is very much involved in making sure that people stay housed and get housed, and that's and they're also very much concerned, like we are, with people's health, access to primary care providers, and making sure that people are able to pay their bills so they don't lose their housing. So we share that common mission. They're a secular organization, we're a church, but we still have the same set of values. And we want to actually be able to work with them so that we can get this tiny home village thing set up. But the sticking point is where do you put it? You got to have the land. You got to have a place to put these structures.
And within city limits would be preferable.
Would be preferable. So we absolutely want to be able to work with the city moving forward to be able to provide a viable place for people to stay while they transition into a better life.
Our operator is earning her living right now. She has another text for us.
We do have another text. Here it is. Do Father Bernie and Pastor Robert feel the outcome of the 2024 election will have a big impact on how organizations like St. Tim's will be able to continue helping homeless and underserved people?
So, one thing about that, Linda, is that I'm not a political animal. I don't have a political party that I belong to. I've been unaffiliated from a political party. I'm not even independent. I'm unaffiliated. I don't vote in primaries. I certainly vote, but I don't vote in primaries because I don't belong to a political party. But we want to maintain the separation between church and state. As a congregation, we don't comment on political candidates. What we do comment on are legislation that affects the people that we serve. So if there's legislation that has to do with rolling out and expanding food stamps, we're going to be in favor of that. If there's a political candidate that, may or may not fit what we think is appropriate, or not we don't have that. None of that. I don't have an opinion on any of that. So the fact of the matter is regardless of who becomes president, we're going to continue to serve people who are underserved.
Okay.
A lot of people drive down the street and they see these homeless encampments, or maybe one or two tents, and they not all, a lot of them just seem to have a horrible mess, like 10 these huge garbage bags, and I wonder, what is this all about? What are these people doing here? Why? I just do not understand the homeless situation at all. And going back to what you said earlier, that just because you have a job doesn't mean you have a place to live, because if you're pumping gas or something, I would imagine you can't find a place.
Well, many of our people who are unhoused have jobs, and they've had jobs for years, in fact. Where are they going to live?
Yeah.
And so that kind of brings us back full circle, too, that we don't have a house. There's no place for the rungs on the ladder to climb out of unhoused status into house status. Those rungs are too far apart. We need to put some smaller rungs in between so that people can make their way from living on the ground to living in an apartment or whatever.
And I don't want to be a drive-by psychologist or something, but it looks like a lot of these people have some mental problems.
Well, there's no doubt that they do. Yeah. And, we need better services for them in that regard. And ADAPT they're doing a good job, but they need to bring in more people, more professionals, so that they can care for the people. But when they want to bring someone in, where's that person going to live? So this housing thing, it takes in all of our problems.
My favorite is where their wives going to shop.
Well,
the thing you hear all the time, why there's no doctors here, because their wives have no place to shop.
Well, there's all kinds of reasons why people, retirees like to live here because it's beautiful, and they sold a house down in San Jose for $1.5 million, right, and they got a pocket full of money. They can afford to live here. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the people who are working in the stores, and we used to talk about people pumping gas, which is, now that we have the self-serve thing, but we need to be able to get them to a point where they can save up their money, where they're not just living to survive, but living to be able to move towards stability in their lives. That is so paramount in importance to us as a congregation.
I think a lot of people just don't understand. They say, "Well, I made it. Why haven't they made it?" Right? I was a teenager. I got a job, and I did. But I was talking to a friend of mine the other day that we both had the advantage of, first of all, being born with at least enough intelligence to get by in the world, which a lot of people aren't. That we were also raised or in some way influenced by somebody who taught us a work ethic and things like that. And a lot of these people just were not.
Well, there's many different levels to that. People experience different levels of trauma, and
stability and family life when they're young.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty much what I was saying. Yeah. So, we were brought up in normal households, or at least pretty close to normal, or enough that we were able to survive and go out and get a job and do what you're supposed to do.
The number of people that have grown up in this area, but maybe they grew up somewhere else and they ended up here. The number of people that experienced adverse childhood experiences is tremendous, and so maybe they're we're talking about children that are being molested, raped by a family member or a trusted friend, and that person has all kinds of emotional and mental issues, PTSD, a full gambit of things in their lives.
Going to be looking into that in next week's program, by the way.
Well, it's a good topic.
That's our insanity.
That's a really good topic, Ray. I'll be listening in, because what happens when those people aren't given first of all, society has allowed them to be completely broken by not intervening. And then not only that, they never got justice. Whoever it is that perpetrated that violence against that person was never brought to justice.
I used to be a sexual abuse investigator. That's what I did with the Alaska State Troopers. And before I became an investigator, I was on patrol. And it was just amazing the things you'd see going into houses. And there was one small community I would go to, and I got a call about a domestic incident at a certain house, and I knocked on the door, and there were like 3 kids in there, and a small community, they all knew me, and they said, "Oh, hi, Ray," and sat down and continued to watch television. Mom's in the bedroom. The house was so hectic that the idea of the cops coming to the door didn't mean anything to them, because they had that television show to watch, and Mom was in the bedroom.
I'd like to mention a whole other element relating to St. Tim's, is when the onslaught by the city against the church was getting real serious, it also became clear that there was little in the way of local media and journalism to let the local people know exactly what this
We're
was
working on that.
all about. The local pilot lists didn't cover it very well. This radio station did, but it's limited in its resources. And the only other nearby media outlet, the Lost Coast, whatever
Outpost, yeah.
Outpost, did a good job. But so I personally kind of made it my job, as it were, to try to find ways of publicizing it worldwide through YouTube and a website called progressivechristianity.org, so that people who anywhere from now on want to find out what happened. We have a whole playlist on YouTube of maybe 13 items about St. Tim's. The Progressive Christianity website has had 4 major articles, and I've been getting communications from South Africa, from Australia, and a whole number of places within the U.S., either sympathizing with the church or saying, hey, the same thing is going on here in Minnesota. Our church is right near a big park, and we're serious in our efforts to feed the poor. And some churches do feedings that are related to their missionary or proselytizing efforts. And St. Tim's and Episcopal Church generally, and a lot of other churches, don't do that. They're offering a meal and the fellowship and human interaction that takes place during that meal, and they're not trying to convert anyone. They're just showing respect and love, which they understand by their faith is what they're supposed to do. But imagine if a church didn't have the connections that an Episcopal church has. If they got serious about feeding the poor in the same way that St. Tim's did, and the city started prosecuting them, they wouldn't stand a chance, because they didn't have the type of a support of the Episcopal Church and a law firm that is noted for its willingness to do pro bono publico work. That means legal work on behalf of the public. And if they do that, and if they lose the suit, they're willing to swallow the expenses. But if they win the suit, they get their resources. And I don't quite know the negotiation after the federal judge's decision, but it seems to me they cut their own fee in order to stop the really absurd abatement procedure, which was still alive and could have gone on, and created another lawsuit, which would be far more damaging. So.
Well, absolutely they did, Pastor Robert. Absolutely, they cut their fee and took a probably 2/3 of what they would have actually been, what their billable hours were, because they wanted to move things forward. And I'm glad they did.
Oh, yes.
Because it had already taken up far too much of our emotional and spiritual energy as it was. But I'll tell you, the one thing that really, Ray was talking about, well, the garbage, when we see the people and they're unhoused in the garbage. When I see that, my thought is what can I do to make that situation better? Instead of demonizing the person,
right.
My thought is how do I organize to be able to figure out how to collect their garbage? Yeah. How do I help clean up the mess? How do I help empower them to clean up their own mess? These are the thoughts that I have. My thought isn't they must be scumbag individuals, that are subhuman. My thought is that if they're living like that, it's my responsibility to give them the hand up so that they don't have to live like that anymore.
I would guess, I don't want to play psychiatrist, that the people who are living in there's 5 huge bags of garbage next to their tent are probably some of the mentally ill people or people with mental problems.
Well, one of the things about the bags of garbage is if you're on Highway 101, the Oregon Department of Transportation will pick up those bags.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I don't know what the schedule is or how that all works, but they have asked them to keep their garbage alongside the road.
Oh,
like
good.
Once a week they'll come by and get it.
So it's not what it looked like to me going by.
So it's been put there, and if it's been put out toward the road, it's deliberately set there for them to pick it up. But the scheduling, it's not, they don't go by daily, and whether they go by weekly or however that works. But that's only on state roads. So if it's a county road, it's not going to work like that.
I've lived here for about 6 or 7 years now, and in that time I have never once been bothered by a homeless person. I think I had one ask me for a match one time, and he legitimately wanted a match. It wasn't the opening line. And then one day I was coming out of the studio here and getting in my truck, and there was a homeless person there with a dog. Well, my dog had just died, and I had a bunch of biscuits in the glove compartment. So I asked this guy if he wanted the biscuits, and he was actually a little reluctant, and then he took them, and said, well, okay. The next day on Facebook, which I was on for a very short period of time, this is one of the reasons I left, there was criticism of me interacting with a homeless person and giving them something out of my truck.
For their dog.
Huh?
For their dog.
Well, you couldn't tell if you were across the street or something. I was just handing him something, and it was one of these dog biscuits. But I'm thinking, is there the homeless police that are checking on these people?
Well, you hit on something.
And not only at 4:41 or something like that, he was saying.
But what you're hitting on is somebody's driving by and they're looking out their windshield, and they've decided that they know what all those interactions were. They've decided they know all the things that they fill in the gaps on the story. They see the person, they make the decision about, why doesn't that person have a job?
Right.
That they look capable of working to me. They have no idea who that person is. They have no idea what the challenges they face.
Where does he get the nerve to give them something?
But they have no idea that what you're doing is giving dog treats to the dog. They have no idea.
Could have been a ham sandwich or something really good. It's none of their business.
So what I would say is that what we need to do as a population, as a community, is not have contempt prior to investigation. We need to recognize within ourselves our prejudices when we have come to conclusions based on no information.
All right.
We all need to take, because we're all guilty of it. I do it too. I have plenty of people that I make thoughts or fill in gaps. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I try to recognize that and keep my mouth shut if I can.
At the time that this incident happened, because I was on Facebook about 2 weeks, and I started to realize I'm starting to dislike people I otherwise like because of some of their comments. And I don't know if that was just a short period of time where there was a lot of Facebook stuff about the homeless. And one friend of mine was talking about, well, you have to carry a baseball bat in your car, and talking about how much trouble it was to get into Fred Meyer, and that would be a good use for the. They actually talked about giving poison food to the homeless camps and things like that.
Yeah, that stuff drives me crazy.
Was I looking at a short period of time in Facebook, or is that always like that?
It depends.
I've avoided it.
It goes in spurts. I try to kind of pay attention to what's going on, and it goes in spurts.
Yeah.
But the fact is that unhoused people are far more likely to be the victims of crime than to be the perpetrators of crime. And sometimes they get into, they're hanging out, they're spending a lot of time with each other, and they might have altercations amongst each other. A lot of that has to do with the mental health stuff, though.
We're running out of time, but very quickly, there was one vocal person who used to go to council meetings a lot, who was very vocal about homeless. And one of the things he said is we have to clean up the drugs, and when we clean up the drugs, the homeless will leave.
Yeah, it's not that simple even at all. And they're not going to leave. They're from here in the first place.
Right.
These are people that went to Brick and Sober High School, like myself. These aren't people who showed up here because somehow or another they're looking for the easier, softer ride.
Yeah.
These are people they're our own people.
We're down to 3 minutes.
Sister Cora Rose, when she testified before the council, said the first day she went to work, and then she's a lawyer as well as a Lutheran deacon, and the first day she went to work at St. Tim's, she was shocked that 5 of the people that were needing help in one form or another were classmates of hers when she went to Brookings Harbor High. And there are transient homeless all over this country, and there are people trying to find a good place to somehow survive and perhaps maybe thrive.
We used to have a guy here who did. He had this unbelievable Alabama accent, which is the reason I grabbed him to do a show. And he would tell these little stories about when he was homeless and things like that. And he said that he was on the road once, and he had this camera, and he's in line for some kind of a food thing, and people are not not wanting him to take their pictures because they just didn't want to be seen like that. And he said, and he couldn't understand it. He said, you know, a lot of people don't realize that you may just be a few minutes away from being homeless yourself. It wouldn't take too many turns of fate. Okay, now we're down to 2 minutes. Wrap up.
Well, so one of the things that I want to, you know, I guess to summarize our position as a church, we very much care deeply about creating stability in the lives of people. And you can't have stability in your life if you don't have a place where you can be. So housing is extremely important to us. And we want to see better options and more options for people who are.
You got 1 minute. Tell us how we give St. Timothy's money.
Oh well, you just write a check, send it to the church.
That's the simplest way.
Okay. Can you do it online? Do you have?
Yeah, our website, sttimothyEpiscopal.org.
Okay.
I want to say in the 50 seconds we have left how proud Brookings, I think, should be of St. Tim's, especially of Sister Cora Rose and Pastor Bernie, but a whole group of volunteers who are seriously involved in getting help to people who really need it. And they see this as part of their own faith and their own commitment. And Brookings should be very proud.
Okay, you've been listening to a Curry Cafe, where we have informal discussions like the one you just heard. If you want to be a part, go to kciw.org and send us an email. We can have you on if you want to be.